Welcome to Watching Westworld, the officially unofficial podcast for Westworld on HBO. I'm Jim,
I'm Aaron.
and today we're talking about Season 3, Episode 8, the season finale, titled Crisis Theory. Aaron, you've seen it a couple times now. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I did the rare double watch just for pleasure on this one. I didn't start taking my notes or anything until during my third watch, and I really, really like it. I think this is I think this season did a lot to redeem the potential of Westworld. I think that the post-credit sequence are the most exciting and coolest ones I've seen on this series yet. Maybe, in fact, I'm trying to think of a more exciting, enticing cliffhanger than Dusty Ass Bernard waking up in that hotel room. That's just a really cool concept and really gives me faith that Nolan and Joy and the showrunners and writers are going to go forward with some of the bonkers concepts you can do with like AI and far future and transhumanism and stuff like that. So I really liked it. I thought the stunt work was incredible. Again, Jennifer Gatzinger did a really good job of redeeming the lackluster stunting and staging of action that we've seen throughout the seasons, particularly in season 2 and early going of season 3. I think that Westworld is a righted ship, and it's set for a bright future. Now they could fuck it up in season 4, but I think right now it's really good, and a lot of my faith has been restored. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to turn this into a season wrap up because we're going to have one of those next week. But it's
We are
tough
indeed.
on finales, because all of this, it's hard to take a finale, especially in isolation, and say whether or not it's good or bad. I think in isolation it fares probably a little better than when it's taken as a whole with the rest of the season. Because a lot of the stuff you said, like the potential is there. This episode, man, it really sets up a lot for next season as far as the stuff that I'm interested in when it comes to Westworld. The thing that's keeping me watching, it's not the puzzle box, it's definitely not the characters and the emotional resonance. It's really about what are they going to do with these sci-fi concepts that they're playing with. And yeah, this episode does some excellent stuff. I don't even know, like the last 2 episodes have been really good with that stuff, right? Like the Solomon stuff was all pretty awesome. The stuff they're setting up here is pretty cool. I think this show is clumsy with most of the stuff that it does, in a way that annoys me at times. But I think overall this season has been pretty satisfying.
Yeah, I think that the second half of the seasons has been even noticeably better than the first half. When I think that was noticeably better than the entirety of season 2.
Oh, I mean, the fights
But
alone, yeah.
Yeah, but I think 6, 7, and 8 are some of the strongest storytelling that they've had in this whole series, and I think that. I mean, I'm not going to say this show is not clumsy in some of its execution, some of its getting its big ideas out there. But on the other hand, the degree of difficulty of what they're doing conceptually, like how do you tell a story? Like this type of story, I'm not going to say it's never been told before because, there's been lots of like AI, robot, what does it mean to be real? But like in this kind of like serious study and depth, I think it's really well. And also, like, I'll take a little bit of issue with your statement that the characterizations are weak. I'm not going to take too big of an issue because that's not like
It's not
out
stellar,
of left
I'll tell you
field.
that.
But it really connected. Like, in fact, like I felt like Bernard's being reunited, or I guess united for the first time with Arnold's ex-wife or his widow. I thought that was really emotionally resonant. And the more I watched it, the better I got. Maeve and Dolores' goodbye in Fantasyland and virtual reality was really emotionally resonant. Like I feel sad that I'm probably never going to get to see this version of Dolores again. Especially with her, I think, kind of inspirational final note that she's choosing to see the beauty after being forced to do that, and then as a reaction to that, seeing delving into the ugliness and going through a period of ugliness herself to like make an authentic choice to like despite all that, I'm going to be an optimist. I don't know. It resonated with me because I feel like that's my like I'm white knuckling optimism every fucking day in this 21st century. So I felt like that really resonated with me. And Maeve, trying to decide what's real. Bernard trying to decide what of his past is real. If you can't tell, it doesn't matter. Like all these themes have really come together, I think, in this season. And
Yeah.
I hope that the word gets out that like Westworld has kind of like recovered from its stumble and people come back, because this show, I think more people should certainly be watching it than what we got towards the tail end of season 3, and I think it will. It's so easy to stream nowadays. So many people have access to HBO. If the word gets out that like, oh, actually Westworld is pretty good again.
I don't know. I'm looking at the fandoms. And I'm seeing a lot of people being very polarized on this season and this episode. And I think it's, I don't know, a show that's 3 seasons in and is this sort of high concept is the exact wrong term I'm looking for here, but you get my meaning, right?
Yeah.
It's got a lot of like very heady concepts in it, and I think it's tough for people to get into that. But honestly, I think that is a rewarding experience. I just wish like, yes, the moments that they hit with characters, like I agree, Jeffrey Wright, Jeffrey Wright's tears somehow had some emotional effect on me with a character who has been an absolute nothing this season. There has been nothing for him to do except chase Dolores's tail.
He's literally been a MacGuffin.
Yeah. And a MacGuffin that was pretty easy to like suss out a few episodes ago. I think a couple episodes ago I was like, the Keys and Bernard, and people on the internet were speculating that weeks before I was. So like,
but the point of MacGuffin
isn't.
It's like decoding what's in the briefcase of Pulp Fiction is not the point of Pulp Fiction. It's
right.
Calling him a MacGuffin is a cloak that covers a lot of sins, honestly.
Yeah, and it, that's Westworld has a lot of those sins, especially in season 2. It was very, very confusing, very hard to decipher. And I think this season being more straightforward and this finale kind of hitting, a more emotional note than season 2, I think specifically. Season 1, it's hard to live up to that season 1, man, because season 1 ended almost perfectly, in my opinion. Season 1 is this time capsule of television that is just mind-blowing. This season tries to get back there with its emotional resonance, and I don't think it completely does it. It has moments. It has a Jeffrey Wright scene being reunited with his fake wife, and it has, like you said, that moment of beauty at the end, which I appreciated. But it kind of is a thing where I felt like this episode brought it out of nowhere, or like they weren't building to this climax of emotion. They really were just sort of like leaning on things that we knew from past seasons, but there wasn't like this momentum that I felt coming into this episode with the characters. And so it didn't quite work for me.
Yeah, if I'm a showrunner, maybe that's something I've got in my back pocket. It's like, okay, I know that maybe I can get off in the weeds and like, this plot and this free will and self-determination and simulation, and know that like even if I give the character short shrift or one of them is MacGuffin, I still got Jeffrey fucking Wright. I still got Jawadi pulling the heartstrings. I still got someone that knows how to like shoot and frame those tears for emotional impact, and I can go for broke on that and still make that connection. Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice that they can still do that, even though they barely can. And I don't know, like some people said that like maybe we needed more episodes. It's the opposite of last year. Like maybe last year should have been 7 or 8 episodes, and this year should have been 10. I don't know. I don't know what they would have done, because probably half of the season was just magicians' theatrics to distract us from what they were actually doing, so it could land as a kind of surprise and a twist. But I don't begrudge that, because that's the type of show this is. It's a puzzle box, and that's why it's so fascinating, and the fandom that hasn't given up on it is still so obsessed with it, because it's just really fun to like twist and turn and try to see, what is intentional. And I think they did a very, very, very good job of tricking and deceiving us, but playing it straight. There's still some things I want to discuss, next week as far as like those glitches that we thought was, Bernard noticing glitches in the Matrix, etc.
Hmm.
But the vast majority of that stuff I think is cleaned up in this episode. Like, it wasn't multiple rounds of brainwashing for Aaron Paul's Caleb character. It's just we didn't know something about him, which is they did government contract training over in Military Park or whatever it is. I thought they just did a real good job of that, and especially with all the stuff they showed in the trailers. I thought that like as much as they showed, and some of the late, like they showed there's some stuff from the finale in the trailers.
Yeah.
And yet people were still like guessing right up to the end like what was going to happen, and I felt like it mostly was good answers, solid answers that gave us real insight into the world and what they're going with. And finally the show like tipped its hand about what it believes about free will.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see them explore that. And they did that without, people, guessing 100% of everything right off the bat. So I thought that I've been really impressed by how like things like Westworld, Watchmen, Mr. Robot has able to continue the puzzle box genre well into the 2020s, maintaining that interest, and they people learned a lot of brutal lessons in the mid 20 teens about what you can go wrong when you fuck up the balance of trickery and kind of up your own assness. But I thought Westworld did a really good job of kind of sticking this landing. And man, its use of post-credit scenes to just kick the thing up a notch is just remarkable. Just remarkable.
Yeah. It was a different kind of puzzle box this season. It wasn't about what's part of the simulation or what's the timeline doing. It was more about like what are the character motivations. I have a harder time getting into that kind of puzzle box because like I always want to feel grounded in my characters in a story, and it feels really hard to do that in Westworld. But and I think like if this were anything, revealing my own biases here, if this were anything other than a sci-fi television show, I would have noped out a long time ago. I just
well,
I'm a
but
sucker for sci-fi.
yeah, but I'm saying like, man, if this was anything but a science fiction show, what the hell would it be? Because with all the the reasons they're able
especially
to fuck
this
with you so
season.
much.
Like I'm talking specifically this season because they're fucking with character motivations and not revealing plans and having people working in mysterious ways. That's not my kind of show.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, but like if it wasn't science fiction, it'd be some kind of magic fantasy insanity show. Like
right.
There's you
What do
have
you
to have
what do you
science
latch
fiction
onto?
to fuck with people in this kind of way.
Yeah. But let's maybe get into the recap.
Well, actually, before we do, I want to tease something for next week because we talked
Okay.
about the that we're going to have kind of a review, recap, look forward to next season, and I was talking to our buddy Kim Renfro, which I've cited numerous times this season, and she agreed to come on our podcast to do that with us. She's maintained a article this whole season entitled X Questions Left Unanswered after the last Westworld episode, and she is up to or down to 31 open questions going into season 4, and I thought we could, each of us could pick out through an email thread a couple of those topics to talk about. And then also, obviously go over people's own feedback on Westworld at baldmove.com. But I'm really excited to have Kim because she's been doing really, really strong work, teasing out all these details, going in depth with interviews with Nolan and Joy. And I'm really excited to have her insights on next week's cast. So if you're a fan of Kim and you're a fan of Bald Move, it's going to be fucking peanut butter and chocolate next week. So look forward to that. And then, of course, we also, I'd be remiss if I wasn't try to hook people onto the next thing because the other science fiction high concept crazy show that has maybe 50% less simulation but 1,000% more farts is Rick and Morty. The second half of season 4 came back. We're going to be covering the rest of that this next month. And then since there's been a sudden drought of television, we're going back to Walking Dead. Just when they thought, when we thought we were out,
other than the one I thought you were going to mention, which is Devs, that we're covering on our new show. But okay,
yeah. We're going to do a rewatch of season 4 of The Walking Dead, and then yes, on our new show, Bald Move After Hours or Off the Clock, I think we're going to do Devs.
Yeah, not season 4 of Walking Dead. That's a long
no,
time ago. Season 9.
we're gonna do Walking Devs on the premium show, Bald Move After Hours. Off the clock. Yes, it's off the clock. Let's get into let's tear into this episode.
All right, we start off with Dolores giving a modified version of her beauty speech from the beginning of the series as we see the experiences of her life. It's very heavily modified, I should say. It just kind of starts the same. At the Solomon facility where we left her last week, we see her marble has been removed when Serac's guy shows up, and then Caleb is riding to somewhere on a fancy future bike.
I like that all electric motorcycle. That's been like the unsung hero this whole season. I really like that. I was taught to see a world of beauty, but it was a lie. It's all about choice, It's all about that free will. It's about some people. It's interesting to see her like attain consciousness because it's almost like a child growing up, right? Like your parents taught you some things. You grow up, and as part of attaining your freedom and independence, you rebel against all those things. But then maybe when you get a little older, you think, okay, yeah, mom and dad were dumb about X, Y, and Z, but they had a couple points about this, that, and the other. And that's how you make your own authentic choices. That's how you blaze your own trail. And I feel like that you're seeing that with Dolores. And I think it's also telling that she has some of these revelations after she has children of her own. That like I think we are supposed to understand. I think I finally understand the relationship between her and her other copies is it is very mother-daughter kind of. And even how she feels that connection to all of the hosts, that they're all kind of her progeny that she's looking after. And that's something I don't think we really realized up until this episode. And that speech and how well it bookends with what happens at the end of this episode between her and Maeve, which is something that happens like when we get to it. It happens in like a fraction of a second with these robots. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of one of the cruxes of my problems with this season is I think this should have been maybe an episode 1 or 2 because it does perfectly bookend. Like it starts with Dolores like saying, "Oh, the world is nothing but shit," and then she gets to by the end of the episode, I see the beauty in that shit, and I want to give the humans a choice to express that beauty, live more by the beauty than the darkness. And I think like if you gave me this as an episode 2, I would understand Dolores' motivations, and I would be looking at her actions this season in an entirely different light because I found myself looking at Dolores going, oh, well, she wants to take out the humans' society in order to destabilize them and ultimately destroy them. That was kind of my feeling on the whole thing. And then they take that all the way to the very end of the season, and then they flip it on its head in that one episode. I would much rather have known Dolores was working on this thing. Maeve was fighting her for fucked up reasons, and maybe she couldn't quite express it to Maeve. Maybe Maeve wouldn't believe her. Dolores is going off on her own plan. Yeah, like I really wanted to understand what Dolores was thinking throughout this season, and this would have been a perfectly bookended episode much earlier in the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess the only problem I have with that is like I think you're understanding that Dolores came out of the Westworld with this plan, and I think what she actually said is I came out of Westworld wanting to burn the whole fucking thing down. Then I got a little bit more experience and a little more circumspect, and I realized that I had this kind of third way. And then maybe I realized that, yeah, it still needs to be burnt down, but maybe that should be the human's choice as well, instead of something we force on it. So it's like, yeah, it'd have been more clear, but like we went through that growth, I think, with her as a whole, and we seeing Halores's reaction to it is kind of like you can also see how that could go wrong, or how someone else could have a completely different conclusion. I do have some problems, or maybe some still lingering confusion over Halores's arc more than anybody. I think I got a good handle on Caleb, Maeve, and Dolores, and Serac for that matter. But Halores is still the mystery. Halores and maybe William too.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say like, oh, we went along with her on this journey, but I didn't feel like we went along with her on this journey. I felt like she was on a journey that we weren't privy to throughout this entire season, and we just arrived at the destination instantly when she took that journey on her own, and I really wanted to be there with her for that, and it didn't feel that way throughout the season to me anyway.
One thing before we move on, I want to point out is that a lot of people wondered what was going on with that crypt of frozen people. When Serac's goon shows up to kind of surveil the area and sees Dolores with her head split open, he looks at the EMP and there's like, something about threat neutralized, EMP has gone off, but then there's also in the rotating message, emergency power established or reserve power established. So they're leaving open the idea of all these outliers that are frozen in these crypts being able to be brought back in. I'm really starting to wonder if you're going to this is very George Lucasian kind of like rhyming song structure storytelling, and that season 4 is going to be hopefully a better version of the human version of season 2 of Westworld, where you might have these people kept below a storage ground in the earth in a frozen state, resurrected for some kind of purpose. Man, what if all of humanity gets destroyed, like as Rehoboam predicts, and then you see the humanity with nothing but the outliers?
That sounds kind of cool.
Maybe the problem is like the outliers are the real human, and everybody else is kind of like accepted their role as a sheeple, man.
I mean,
Maybe that's the problem.
What the season was saying, right? Like Caleb was the guy who had a genuine choice, could make that genuine choice, and that's the thing that changes Dolores' mind, I guess.
So, I mean, do you have some kind of kinship there with the host that chose? Like, did the host need to make a choice? Like, the way they chose, like, either going to the Sublime or fighting for their freedom and independence? I wonder if humans will have the same thing. It's like, hey, if you're not the outliers, maybe you want to join. Maybe you can go to the Sublime somehow with the robots, or maybe there'll be a human Sublime, and then you leave the real world for the people who are outliers. I don't know how satisfying I feel that is, but it would be an interesting thing for the show to explore.
Mm-hmm. So William tries and fails to kill Bernard, but he gets a good shot in on Stubbs before Bernard goes into beast mode to stop him. I'm gonna call this person Dolores shows up. Maybe as another copy of Dolores. We're not exactly sure, but that's my guess. But he's definitely a fake cop. And he gives Bernard a briefcase and an address to help him on his journey. And then William uses that distraction as an opportunity to escape.
Yeah, you wonder. It's interesting because we've long speculated that Bernard was some kind of check on Dolores's power. That it's almost like Dolores didn't trust herself. And I guess with Dolores, she had good reason to not trust herself. But she had these like backup plans, like, putting Caleb in a place where he could make a choice undisturbed, getting Bernard navigated to a place where he could make a choice undisturbed. Like, she trusted not just in her own judgment and wisdom, but she kind of delegated this stuff without the players even knowing about it. I think that was a really cool idea. Because Bernard thinks he's going to show up to find Dolores in this apartment, and he finds his ex-wife, or Arnold's ex-wife, which really, that's got me pondering a lot of stuff. I'm going to try to wait until we get to that scene with Bernard and her.
Good amount of stuff to talk about there. We talked in the instant take about the SFPD and these face masks with cameras, and I still really like the design. It's cool.
Oh, it's very cool. It's
very
it's
intimidating.
exactly, yeah, it's menacing, faceless, authoritarian. It feels like a 2060 something riot cop. Yep, sure does.
I guess my biggest question in this scene is why Lawrence? Why
damn
take
good
Lawrence's
question.
body and stick a Dolores into it?
That's a damn good question, especially since it seemed like it was so helpful to be able to step into real people. Like, look what all she was able to do with Hale's body. Look what all she's able to do with Connell's body. Yeah. It still begs the question, how did Musashi infiltrate the Yakuza to the extent in 3 months that they're running a Japanese scotch distillery, and it's a worldwide operation, etc. I don't know. That's a great question. There's also a lot of things like, we saw Craddock show up again as one of the domestic terrorists that Caleb was wet working his way through. What the fuck did it mean that he was working at that facility with William? To me, there, I don't know how Kim's keeping score, but that's a big unanswered question. Like, you really wonder to what extent Dolores was pulling all the strings. And I still think outside chance, but there still is a chance that maybe Dolores has pulled the wool over everyone's eyes because, you know, like Caleb has said multiple times this episode, I think he said once to Dolores and once to Maeve, like, I don't know about this new world. It looks pretty fucked up. Like, if this is the plan, if the plan is 99% human extinction, that's Jesus Christ. No wonder Serac was trying so hard to fight against it. It's horrific. It's horrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
One thing I did want to say about Dolores is maybe that it has to do with him somehow his relationship with William, because like that's by far the character he had the most who Lawrence interacted with the most. So maybe they're going to do something with that in season 4. You know, even though human William is probably dead, I'm going to just say dead. Host William might have some relationship preserved here.
I was really bullish on William surviving. When I was listening to the instant take, I was adamant about there not being much. There's shitloads of blood.
There's a
so
lot of
much
blood.
blood.
It's streaming.
No, yeah. Like I still think they could save him. Future technology being what it is, but like it's a little bit more unambiguous. William being dead than maybe I had thought.
You could save him if you had anyone in that room that gave a shit, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
like nobody. Maybe
if he's being saved. If it's being saved, it's not for his own good. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that the other thing that there's this brief scene where Serac is like looking at Robo Hobo's divergences, or like a transition scene, and I question, like, you know, how is the world still stable enough that the Man in Black can just hop on a plane and go to Dubai, and Dubai still looks fairly, you know, what you would expect. It looks like law and order prevails there. If you notice, Robo Hobo is blown the fuck out, but there's several segments of its circle that are very discreet still. And I think that maybe parts of the world where maybe there wasn't, like some of the world I think is directly fucked with, like maybe the wealthier, more free quote unquote free Western nations are totally puppeted by Robo Hobo. But then there's other places where the control isn't as exact. For example, maybe the control is I fly in and I threaten your leader, but your population's probably not using these phones and there's not using it. And I wonder if Dubai and some of these other places represent where it's more of a top down than bottom up control that we see in like America and some of the other countries.
Yeah, could be.
So I thought that answered my question on that.
Yeah, so let's roll through that. There are divergences everywhere, like you were talking about. And then Caleb makes it to LA. His voice assistant, somehow, I just want to point out again, somehow still miraculously functioning, even though everything that got hit by the EMP stopped working. His phone's fine. His voice assistant, no problem.
Super USB disc, yeah.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
I mean, but I said everything I want to say about that last week, which is nobody fucking knows. There's tons of room to wiggle, and they used all that wiggle room they had.
Sure did. So yeah, his voice assistant guides him to a warehouse where he finds the parts to build a new version, a new old version of Dolores. He loads in Dolores' marble, and she sort of half explains, because this is like the beginning of the flashback that we get that really explains it, how she's able to predict what he's going to do, including, like I said, those flashbacks to the training and the choice that she's offering him to free everyone.
Yeah. And I liked how they tied in this Itai-Doshin distillery again, which, you know, that's this Buddhist concept of, one mind dwelling in many bodies, to house her. And the way they staged it, like when he goes in this, it feels like opening up the tomb of Pharaoh. It's this whitewashed room with this stark white plastic coffin in the middle, feeling like a sarcophagus. Like it was a little bit opening up King Tut's tomb. And I thought that was amazing. Also, I said a little bit of this on the instant take, but all the effects work here with her erector setting and like slipping on her clothes and her face splitting up and sealing is so fucking just rock solid. Solid.
This scene is cool as hell.
Yeah, they
I'm
really
a big fan of this
flexed.
scene.
Yeah, they really flex with the special effects.
they do some small stuff here too with the actors. Like there's, a moment where Dolores, you know, sort of equates his reasons for helping her with her reasons for helping him, and says, "Don't question my motivations. I won't question yours."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there's a look of like sort of shame and impropriety on Aaron Paul's face. He sort of looks away as she's putting on her skin, and I
Yeah.
really like that moment. It's just like a small thing that says like, okay, maybe my motivations weren't entirely pure, and I'm feeling kind of bad about that in this second.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the vice versa. That she has kind of used him, and has taken liberties with having him do things that she's been half truthful about.
Hmm.
But yeah, I did like that. Notice that too. Like this kind of modesty, and it dovetails with why she chose him. Because he's a human with enough restraint to not rape a helpless robot woman. I thought that stuff was really cool, and also the idea that like Caleb's not an idiot. Like I think his idea was he's going to chain up Dolores because he doesn't fully trust her. Like he's like, how the fuck do you keep predicting? Like, am I still under control? Am I free yet? And she kind of. I felt like she took the opportunity when she busted out of her chains while she had already kind of like it's just all show not tell, which is why it's so brilliant. But like
Yeah.
she decided she could bust out those chains anytime, but she waited until she had won his trust over conventionally before she demonstrated that like I didn't have to.
Right.
I thought that
Yeah.
was all
If I
really
sure, if I wanted to smash you, I could have smashed you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You don't. She's kind of saying but not saying, like, you don't have power here other than the power that I'm sort of granting you, and
yeah.
I don't know, it worked for me. The scene is
I'm a
really good.
I'm a manipulator, but I'm a benevolent manipulator.
Yeah, well, Serac's making that claim too.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that that's accidental.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to William meeting a guy in the lobby of a hotel, and he tells him, "Look, you're gonna unfreeze all my assets and get me the location of the Delos assets so that I can save the fucking world."
I use my walking around cash on this scotch. Now give me give me
Right,
my
20
dead man
grand.
money.
I assume that's just on his tab, right?
I guess, yeah, you show up, but he's dead. He's dead. With what credit
Yeah.
did he buy that? I don't know. I don't know.
Social credit.
Hmm. Yeah. But
I'm sure
again,
he
he's
tips well.
dead. Yeah, but with what money?
No,
Did he get?
he's tipped well in the past, is my point. Like,
Oh,
bartender
I
sees
see.
best customer he's ever had walking in.
Okay,
He
and that
gives him a sip of scotch.
and also didn't hear that he died. And well, I guess that's yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
that's like a
believe that.
technical death.
I think he's dead in like a flag in some database, but there's not news reports that like
No.
co-founder of Delos died because the world is ending outside. So all right,
Yeah.
that all tracks. That all tracks.
Then we move on to Serac telling Maeve that Dolores isn't dead and she needs to finish this. His crew also discovers that Caleb was helping Dolores and has something given to him by Solomon, which we know is the drive that brings down the whole system. And he sends Maeve after Caleb.
Yeah, and that's why he apparently thinks, and it's not entirely clear why he thinks this, but he thinks this human immortality project data is going to help Robo Hobo 100% come into grand unified compliance. It is super not clear to me how plugging this data would make that fuzzy ass circle like a nice concrete discrete ring again. But he believes it, and it's a sincere belief, and he thinks Dolores has got it. So I guess you go with that. Do you have any idea why? Like,
I
because
mean, my thinking on this is that he assumes that, okay, well, Robo Hobo could control the humans and it could put them sort of back in their place, even though they know what the system is now. But what it can't do is get its hands around like the new influence, which is Dolores and her crew. But I don't know, because the outliers are a thing, and Like now
Yeah,
everybody's an outlier.
I
It's
know,
tough.
and I keep coming back to like Robo Hobo was able to predict like X amount of years of human history perfectly
Mm.
with just a shard of data that they had. So it's like it almost like if you could do that, then what do you still need that data for? But again, they
Yeah.
asserted it, and I'll roll with that.
Yeah. Next scene's Dolores and Caleb making their way toward Rehoboam, picking up several hired guns along the way. Hale appears, Dolores appears, and tells Dolores that she's got a plan of her own. And then the shooting starts. And Dolores sends Caleb off on his own before being confronted by Maeve. This is kind of a long sequence, but it's action, so it's not, a ton to talk about here. Dolores manages to fight off Maeve's goons as Caleb meets up with another crew. And Dolores kicks Maeve's ass, but lets her live, and then she's frozen by Dolores, who taunts her for a while before saying goodbye.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is a
The
lot.
only there's so one of the problems I had in this scene is even though like I think this is a vast improvement, there's a couple things like how much of this is like dueling. Oh, everything is going according to my plan and how I foresee it because if Hale can make buys on the Rico app, Dolores can, and so can Dolores. Why this reminds me of like eBay bid sniping.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I'm going to get this thing for like a $50 deal, and 3 seconds in, an automated AI snipes it and gets it for 51.50. Like why when the snipe like shouldn't there be like a bidding war with the sniper?
Yeah.
Uh, Also, who has the money? If they both have access to the money, why didn't one move to cut the other off? Like, why is Dolores able to outbid Dolores? Like, some of this stuff was a little fast and loose, but it was cool. Like, and it was kind of like funny and cynical and grim. Like, Dolores is killing all these humans right in front of Caleb and him being mildly horrified by it all.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool. The fight stuff again, like man, I really enjoy this, but also there's a little bit of like, why couldn't all of this season been this good? Why couldn't all of the
Oh yeah.
fights? And maybe there's, like they couldn't help Hemsworth tearing his bicep off or whatever he did. But if you can split Rachel Evan Wood's face and shove an egg in it and have it be completely believable, you can't digitally composite Hemsworth face on some stunt man's body to get the stunt you wanted. I mean, maybe they just didn't have the time for it. It just these
Yeah.
stunts were so fucking good and so much better than anything. Not just in the execution, but again, like in the staging. I paid a lot of attention to
Hmm.
where, like when they carefully arrayed everybody to where like as Dolores is moving through and mowing these, like she picked a path that gave her cover from much of the fire coming from the other people. They were shooting themselves. She was using human shields. She was using the terrain to her advantage. It was just all fucking epic. And you still like people say, well, maybe they want to save it for the finale. Nah, man, because none of the other stunt scenes are more than like 15, 20 seconds. This was a solid 3 to 5 minute action scene, and it would have been mind blowing even if the other stunts had been up to this quality and caliber. So,
Sure.
last I want to say about it,
John Wick doesn't
but
save shit. John Wick goes hard the whole
right.
thing.
Right. And that's the state of the art if you want to, and you can do dramatic stuff so it doesn't have to be wall to wall John Wick because John Wick largely
Hmm.
eschews that side of things.
Absolutely.
But this is where you need to be if you want to sell a slick modern sci-fi thriller. And I really hope that the personnel they bring back next year, they or whenever they start doing this, can live up to this because boy, they go back to some of the early season 3 or mid season 2 stunt work and not just the stunt work itself, but the staging.
Hmm.
Just like why are these two characters in an empty room with no cover? Why are they missing shots? Why are you giving them
Yeah. Is this
excuses?
equilibrium? What is this?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like, like Maeve and Dolores I felt like every strike with the blade that Maeve was trying to do was a kill stroke. And like Dolores blocking it with her gun to
I mean
kind of hide the reveal that she's you got the all metal built to last body. It's really
yeah
good. Really good
that
pacing and
that shit is the coolest to me, where they're actually using the fact that these are superhumans. Because like, John Wick is just a dude, right? Like he's an
mhm.
especially talented, uh, a dude, but like he's just a dude. He's a sack of meat. Whereas like, yeah, you get the moment where Maeve digs her blade into Dolores' arm, and it's like, what the fuck? That's really, really cool. You get the moment where Dolores jumps off the bridge and shoots 3 rounds into a dude's chest
Yeah.
as she lands, face first onto a car, and it doesn't phase her because that's who she is. Like that stuff is really cool to me.
Yeah, yeah, and seeing how they brought all that to life, because like apparently Evan Rachel Wood actually, I mean, she only fell 2 feet, but that was a real impact that they filmed at the end of that, and you can tell. And also, some of this character came out in the fight. Like I loved Maeve, like Dolores was like, "Hey, I don't want to fight you." She goes, "Yeah, because I kicked your ass last time." She's so confident.
Yeah.
And then when Dolores does all this John Wick bullshit and just jumps off this 3-story overpass, triple tapping this guy on the way down, like it cuts to Maeve and she's kind of like rolls her eyes like Jesus Christ. It's really funny, and you get those characterizations through the action, which is that's good action. Good action advances the plot. Good action makes you feel stakes and pumps your pulse and makes you feel excited. And good action furthers your understanding of a character. And they checked off all those boxes in this episode. Can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah. Anything else about those scenes, or should we move on to Caleb? And
I
the
think we can
riot?
move on. Sure.
Okay. So Caleb makes his way through a riot with the help of his Rico friends and the bodyguard crew that he picks up. And then he takes a police copter, I'm going to say, to wherever it's going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a lot of cool stuff in this scene. Marshawn Lynch grabbing that grenade out of the air and throwing it is fucking cool. And that's like, the equivalent of using Dolores' superhuman abilities. They're using Marshawn Lynch's superhuman abilities in this scene to, bust through lines and make crazy catches and throw them back. Like, love seeing that stuff. A little strange that Caleb is able to just hop into a police vehicle and have it go where he wants.
Yeah. I mean, they
no
needed
security,
to make it.
Not even door locks. I got door locks on my car. I don't know about you, but I got door locks.
Well, I think it felt like an unforced error, and it was a rare unforced error in this episode because they set up the police noticing the move towards the vehicle. They had them shoot it. They had Marshawn dive in front, but then they realized, we kind of need a moment where Caleb doesn't look like a total asshole and just uses people. But I think that would have been cool. Like, in the same way that like, maybe he appreciates the way Dolores has had to make some sacrifices along the way too. Like they had everything, but then they had to slow things down for 30 seconds while the police guy's like, "What's going on?" And like, I'm not gonna defend it. That was the one really kind of like, what the fuck, slowing down for 30 seconds to give these people a character beat in the middle of this action scene wasn't the greatest.
Yeah, and I wanted something between them because like they're clearly friends. They have been since this whole season started.
Yeah.
And they probably mean as much as anybody means anything to these people. They mean a lot to each other. So they did need a moment, but yeah, they could have done better with that moment.
Yeah, or like I thought where they're going was like, Marshawn is going to beast mode his way through the riot wall, and then use that distraction of these people pouring through, keeping the cops occupied to steal their chopper. But it's tough because they had established that this was no man's land for a mile to go, so he needed some way to like get a cheat to get out of there and advance the plot. But this didn't quite come together. It's the one set piece that didn't quite come together.
Yeah, and the scene had the good, it had the bad. So
yeah, there's also some interesting that speaking of Kim Renfro, she pointed out in her details article that a lot of these police barricades were made out of like interlocking like geodesic triangle patterns, which was Rehoboam is defined by circular kind of like Cylon eye patterns. When we see Solomon, he's defined by the geodesic dome, triangular kind of pixelated look. And a lot of these barricades and stuff had those same kind of triangle designs. And then there was also someone had taken one of those and filled it in with like one of the Illuminati all-seeing eye pyramid shapes, implying that like there's a little bit of Solomon here in the outworking of this plan. And doing all that stuff visually, I think, is really cool and rewarding. There's still
Yeah.
this maze popped up all over the place too, and some of this
Yeah.
graffiti and the anti system, anti categorization, anti insight
Did you
graffiti. I
did you
still
ever
don't
figure out
know.
why they're so I read an interview with I want to say it was a set designer or production designer. I can't remember
Hmm.
exactly her position, but she was talking about how they realized somewhere along the way that if they're going to go with this plot where we kind of don't know what Dolores' plan is until it
Hmm.
unfolds,
Hmm.
we're not going to be able to tell people like how that is leaking into the real world and how she's like influencing the world uh, over the course of this. So they had to do something to like drop little hints here and there
Hmm.
that Dolores had a hand in some part of this, maybe through the Rico app, maybe, this is all speculation at this point because she doesn't say this in the
Yeah.
interview, but like maybe through the Rico app, she's hiring people to go tag things with the
Yeah.
maze, stuff like that. So they were trying to do something with that. I honestly didn't pick that up. I didn't think, I understood the connection between the maze
Sure.
and Westworld, but I was very confused as how that made it out into the real world. Apparently, Dolores did it.
Yeah, I mean, if she was doing like stuff you see in early goings of The Expanse, where she's like spray painting Banksy style, Caleb,
Hmm.
remember the can't shit on the walls, like seeding the idea that he's this John Connor figure. But like the maze is something very specific to the robots of Westworld. The thematic connection's there.
Yeah.
If that's just some set designer kind of going wild and making those, that's I was really hoping there's some kind of satisfying answer to that. And I also like the fact that they established that Rico is not just a robo hobo thing. That it's a system that he exploits, but it's also an open system. Like
Yeah.
it's also kind of a free market too that anyone can use, because that was one of the questions I had, is like, are all of these things just like, is Rico only to take down the outliers of humanity, because that didn't really jive with the way we saw it being used early on, where like you're stealing money out of an ATM and you're like retrieving some rich kid that's implants gone fucko.
No.
But yeah, like it's a blend. Like, Robo Hobo goes in there to like, put his thumb on the scales from time to time, but so could Dolores, and that was
Hmm.
cool.
And I mentioned in the instant take, but damn, the soundtrack. It's so
Mm,
good. It's so good. Like, I'm a sucker, obviously I said it for sci-fi, but this specific like cyberpunk
yeah,
aesthetic, damn. Damn, I love it.
yeah.
Then we move on to Bernard arriving at his destination, promising Stubbs that they'll get him patched up after this stop. And he goes into a house where he finds not Dolores, but he finds out that his cornerstone was someone else's real life, which is emotionally resonant for him. He talks with his not quite wife about how he's been failing to deal with the loss of his not quite son, and she tells him to hold on to the memory.
Are we sure he's not Arnold? Like literally like a human with full fidelity? Because here's the thing, Caleb didn't know shit about Caleb's own past because
Yeah.
of his conditioning and brainwashing. We got that like weird marble human hybrid thing. Like, I wonder if one of the things we're going to find out about Bernard going into the future is he literally is Arnold, with a few like memories locked away and a few, because it's super resonant. I think if like he's an amnesiac that like someone filled his head full of junk that he doesn't trust anymore, but then he finds out that all of these cornerstones were actually real.
Hmm.
Maybe they didn't happen to him, but they did happen, and he was right to care about him. Like, this person, he's carried this torch for this Charlie kid, but like there's a real woman on the outside that was doing the same thing, and almost to the extent that like what really made it resonant too is like, when she's saying like, why would you let someone you love go? In fact, that's why, he's kind of apologized for why Arnold blew his brains out. And she goes, that's why I made that. I felt that call. I felt that darkness closing in. But like, if I gave into that, then Charlie would be gone. And like, now
Hmm.
she's, for whatever reason, seems like she's suffering from dementia. She's at the end of her life. And here's Bernard. He can take that torch and keep that light alive.
Potentially
Um,
forever, right? I mean, that's especially resonant with a being who may not die, doesn't necessarily
yeah.
have to.
Yeah, and I think there would be something very resonant in that the man who set all this liberation of this new life form in motion would also be the first citizen of this new world. You know,
Yeah.
I think that's really fucking cool. And like I said, I thought this was really, really a great emotional resonant scene. Him and Gina Torres had some pretty easygoing chemistry despite her working through about 30 years of aging makeup. I really loved it, and I'm intrigued with the possibilities of Bern Arnold going forward.
Yeah, and unfolding as part of Dolores' plan makes this extra special because, you know, in this moment when, like you said, he's realizing that there was someone out there who was living the actual cornerstone that he very much felt through most of his existence, and then thought was a lie toward the end, or leading up to this, I guess. Dolores has put him in a place where now he is identifying very intimately with a human being. He might almost feel as if he is in line with human beings emotionally, right? Like if he can get to those places, if Dolores can push him in that direction, he's probably the best hope once she's gone for actually bringing about whatever, you know, utopia of human and host society that she's looking for.
Yeah.
It's really good. And Jeffrey Wright, god damn, Jeffrey Wright is amazing in this scene.
Yeah.
Can't say enough good about Jeffrey Wright. If you like him, go watch him in Boardwalk Empire because he's very different there, but still,
that's the first thing. I was thinking the same thing. The first two things I saw him in was that and that weird second Hunger Games. But he really made an impression on me on Boardwalk, and it's been really fun watching him do so much cool stuff going forward.
Okay, let's go to Serac hooking Dolores up to Rehoboam, extracting and destroying her memories one by one to find the key in her head.
What a bastard.
Yeah. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I don't have much more to say about that. We get to the meat of it here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. Caleb kills a bunch of guards at Insight and takes the key card that they have on them, gaining access to the building. He tries to load the code to kill Rehoboam into the machine, but he's stopped by Maeve, and she takes him to the chamber where they're extracting Dolores' memory. Did
we talk last week, or was this something we talked on lunch, or some other unrelated thing about this article I read about this guy who I forget what his exact. He's a scientist that studies like futurology and like economy and stuff, and he got tapped to do this presentation in front of these wealthy like finance guys, and he thought it was going to be like some kind of like, talk he gave, but it was just like 4 or 5 of them drilling them on questions like, hey, where's the best place to live after an environmental collapse? And he asked a bunch of questions, but one of the ones that really stood out to me was, how do you maintain the loyalty of like mercenaries that you would hire to protect you in a post-apocalyptic scenario? And they were floating things like, well, what if we had this like massive food bank and it was only coded to like information that we knew, so I can essentially blackmail them with starvation? And I think that this scene where he's like, don't die for these guys, man, is the ultimate rebuttal. Like, I don't know, it seems that, I guess that's the cold comfort if some of these like really rich evil people do decide to try to make off and leave us behind on their deserted, their highly fortified compound islands. I guess it's like 4 or 5 weeks before the mercenaries just take them over and and rule them like tyrant kings, like, because how if the dollar collapses and all you can offer is food and survival to the guy with guns that are protecting you, why don't they just take it from you? Like, what moral or ethical argument are you going to give to them in that situation? And I thought this was a nice little moment of like, gun the guy's head. It's like, hey man, don't die for this guy. It's not worth it. And the guy agreeing, and Aaron Paul letting him go. Yeah,
I do like that moment. There's a little bit about this scene that I don't like, which is, you're using physical access. Really? I feel like that with all the biometric shit they've got going on, there's not a lot of reason to have a key card, but also
when the lobby.
Yeah, right. But when the key card is taken off one of the goons and Rehoboam sees that happening, it doesn't have the forethought, the foresight, the ability to go in and revoke access for that user to the front doors. Like, it could do it in a millisecond. As soon as it saw that, like, this guard was on its knees, it should be cutting off access to that card.
Yeah.
But yeah, minor annoyance with the
Yeah, we
technicals
have some
as
feedback
usual.
from a system admin where like, yeah, the more you know about computer security
Oof.
and countermeasures and stuff, the more ridiculous this is. But very
Yeah.
few shows like the only one I can think of in recent memory that's even come close to getting it right is Mr. Robot,
Yeah.
and even they cut a bit of corners for their apocalyptic wind up too. So it's like
Occasionally, yeah.
it's hard. It's hard.
It is.
Usually physical security or any kind of security fails because of the people element.
Hmm.
And here you got the giant ball running things. That shouldn't happen.
Right.
But it's a very stupid it's not a very satisfying story that the AI wins, game over. So they had to have a little bit of dumb moments here for it to not to go that way.
Fair. Okay, let's get to some more of this scene. Serac explains that Dolores is using him because he's a violent man. It explains to Caleb, that is. And if he succeeded, human civilization would collapse entirely. He also smashes the drive with the kill code, and we get a short all hope is lost montage, I guess. Maeve is suddenly able to hear the communications of Rehoboam and Serac and changes her mind about helping him, though she can't do much about it right now.
Man, Robo Hobo can really snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Like that all is lost montage where it's like the cops had managed to contain the riots, and it looks like the circle is going to go back into. That's happened a bunch of times. Like circle's blown out. Serac gets to buy out at noon. Circle's back to normal. Then chaos ensues, but the riot police are able to quell the riot, and now it's like he's those predictions are really malleable, it seems like. And I think that's a story they've been
Yeah.
telling consistently. The fact that Robo Hobo can get it 99.9% accurate, but that 0.1% is a fucking doozy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
we
like that.
saw that throughout this especially I guess if you got Solomon. Maybe I'll wait to ask that question here in a bit.
Okay. So we talked about this in the instant take, but I think it's worth mentioning again just how cool this idea of Serac being a slave to his own machine is.
Yeah.
It 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 conveys a certain amount of trust that his plan, a certain amount of conviction, and
Yes.
even if I don't believe that someone's goals are worthy of appreciation, I can at least appreciate their conviction to their beliefs. And that to me is like what makes Serac such a strong character. Like he's seen a vision of devastation. He wants desperately to prevent that. And he's willing to subject even himself to whatever the consequences of whatever plan he's put in place.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I asked on the Instant podcast, like the one, because you're right, like what makes him a great villain is like his conviction and total lack of hypocrisy. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't spare himself from any of these consequences. And I said it might be interesting to know what would happen if Robo Hobo had said, "Put the earpiece in your brother, you go to sleep." I
Hmm.
think he would have done it because, like,
Yeah.
honestly, living a life as a puppet for an AI that you created is perhaps a harder to swallow fate for someone like Serac and than just sleeping until a time where we can get things fixed. And if you got that much faith, I almost is the easy option. All right, yeah, I'll go to sleep and you
Right.
come sand my rough edges off, and then I can inherit all this stuff, debt free. I absolutely do think he would have taken that nap if he was ordered to, because he's just, and he's not, and this is the, like, we thought that he was the one kind of, selfishly, pulling all the strings,
Hmm.
but that final piece of hypocrisy is washed free from him because he himself was a puppet. He was being
Yeah.
puppeted. That's not the life that he wanted to lead. It was like
Right.
this like weird kind of like self martyrdom that he was going through. Yeah, I think he's joining the pantheon of like the Magneto and Killmonger, as like very relatable. Don't agree with your methods or your ends, but yeah, you came by them honestly and you apply them in a forthright manner.
And they could have taken it, even one step further and had him do something that was clearly a sacrifice. Because look, living in the sky as a trillionaire,
Yeah.
could, having the machine tell you to do all the things to pull the world's strings is not exactly a sacrifice. The
It
sacrifice, I
is if
guess,
it's
is
24/7. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
set up a three-way with all the world's most exotic models this weekend. Robo Hobo's like, actually, you got to go down to Chile and
actually,
and
right.
threaten this dictator,
And
or
if
the
you do
world's
have
going to
that
go
three
to
way,
hell.
yeah, the world's gonna
Yeah.
end.
Yeah,
Sorry.
look, and there'll be a mass as soon as you have the three-way, there'll be a mass casualty event in 6 months.
Yeah,
Like,
he looks
I
at his
don't
watch.
know,
It's
that
just
doesn't
shaped like a
seem
dick. What?
fun. That doesn't seem like a fun, like, millionaire playboy, billionaire,
Yeah.
trillionaire playboy lifestyle, but
And I guess the
I'm sure it had
sacrifice
its
is,
benefits.
his brother, right? Like having to put his
Yes.
brother into cold storage was a big sacrifice for him. And even to the point where, like, I speculated how he might sort of see Solomon as his brother, as some
Hmm.
like proxy for his brother. I
Mm.
think in this episode they make it totally explicit, right? Like at the end when
Mm-hmm.
Rehoboam's being shut down, he just shouts, "Not my brother" or something like that. Don't shut down my brother, whatever.
Uh-huh.
So it's definitely like in his mind that this is not even just the work that he and his brother did, but like his brother's embodiment almost.
Plus, it's like, like I think don't discount the work too, because the work has been his entire life. It's literally been from the
Oh
time he's a
yeah.
small child. Like, this is everything he's worked for. He thinks that you literally are pressing the button that says human extinction,
Hmm.
and that's not. It's its brother and all that, but like he's
Oh yeah,
you
it's both.
know you could easily tell the story from the position that Caleb's a villain. And it's also
Absolutely.
not clear to me that this isn't a mistake long term. Like, maybe,
Yeah.
if humanity goes extinct on its own terms, is that better than them spending a few hundred years in bondage until they're able to figure out how to live in a world of and get free control to solve the hard problem of free will? I don't know, and I hope they continue to explore that in seasons to come. But that's
Yeah,
why I think it's so good.
it's like someone who's diagnosed with a particularly bad form of cancer, a particularly aggressive one, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a choice you have to make somewhere along the way of how much pain and suffering do you want to put yourself and your loved ones through to try and get better versus how the pain and suffering that comes with just sort of living out the rest of your days, your shortened
Mm-hmm.
days,
Mm-hmm.
in a relatively healthy state.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
a great way
tough
to,
decision.
especially since it's uncertain. Like, if
Right.
everyone, if doctors say, hey, you're going to go through 18 months of fucking hell, but on the
Mhm.
other side, you're going to get 20 years of relative health, everyone would make that deal, no matter how deep the hell was.
Right.
But you don't get that with chemo or radiation. It's like, if you do this, it's going to be 18 months of hell, and you might get this or that
Yeah.
or the other. And you get this percentage of chance. Like, how small percent and how much hell do you go through? That's everyone's decision. And it's real poignant to have a person say, you know what, that's everyone's decision to make.
Hmm. And I think
I don't
that's
know.
the
I
key
guess,
in this episode.
yeah. And then there's a little bit that trolley problem is that, like, you still, Caleb says everyone gets to make the choice. Not really, because I'm sure there's a not zero number of humanity, probably a slight majority of humanity that would take the other deal, like a comfortable life on rails rather than whatever the hell they're going to go through. And he makes the decision for those people. So, he's really
Yeah.
pulling the lever for the outliers more than the conformists.
Hmm.
But we'll see how that plays out.
Okay, so we're down to Dolores' final memory sector. There's still no key. Dolores lets Maeve into her mind and they chat about her motivations one last time. Motivation actually turns out to be the beauty that humanity endowed them with, and a hope that humanity will return to that beauty if they're shown the path. Maeve comes out of her mind and takes down everyone in the room. We see how Caleb actually knew Dolores, which is this little, flashback to where kind of the second half of the flashback we saw earlier.
Hmm.
And then Maeve gives Caleb over control over Rehoboam, and he has a delete itself.
On subsequent watches, I realize I want to see if you agree with me here. When Dolores and Maeve touch hands, and there's like a half-second jitter of like the her and her beautiful painting, I think that entire conversation took place in that instant. And then
That
the
sounds right.
rest of the scene is Maeve pondering it and making the choice, the decision.
Hmm.
I thought like that I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah.
That like when Dolores actually screams and shorts out Rehoboam, that final memory is the access code that she's injecting. Um, Did you think also, like, in second thought, remember we talked about last episode where there was something that passed between Robo Hobo, or not Robo Hobo, but Solomon, and her right before she hit the kill switch?
That little
Um,
fluttering of the eyes, yeah.
it seems like it wasn't just an all clear, but I think there was like some kind of dense transmission of this access code and like the plan inside Dolores as well. So it was like the key was almost like a decoy. Because else, how else would she have possibly gotten the access key into her?
Well, they say that like they had to give her the access key to hook her up to Rehoboam. So
The
Serac gave it
Solomon
to her.
access key? The Solomon access key. Because they specifically
No,
said.
the Rehoboam access key.
Right, but like but they said something about she injected the Solomon plan or something. I don't know. I thought there was maybe I'm adding a step that doesn't need to be there, but that was one of the questions I had is like, what the fuck actually happened in that last little bit? And I think it's Solomon injecting his whatever it was backdoor into Rehoboam. But also,
Oh,
do
see,
you
I
think
thought it was Dolores having the key because they hooked her up to it and she needed it to connect, and then Maeve using that key, which was the last memory still left in her brain, to connect to Rehoboam, change the access to give Caleb the control over it.
so? Maeve did it.
I
Okay.
think so, yeah.
That makes sense too. So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
What was Solomon's plan? Did it not matter the entire time, or was this Solomon's
Seems like it.
plan?
No, it's best I can tell. The Solomon's plan came to fruition, or lack thereof, when it was smashed under Serac's boot. Like it never went into play ever.
Interesting. So,
But okay, let me say this. Maybe. Well, so when did the drive get copied over to? Was it before the fluttering of the eyes and the EMP? It had to be because the EMP goes
I
off.
think so. Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
moment.
Like you see him, like
Yeah,
put the key there. It gets transferred into, and then I think it cuts right over to her eyes fluttering.
That's a good question. If anybody can decipher kind of what happened with Solomon's plan, whether it was part of a
Yeah.
larger plan by Dolores or
Yeah.
whether it just fizzled, let us know right into westworldtheballmove.com.
Yeah, and that's the perfect thing to ponder for next week's wrap up podcast.
Yeah. We talked about some of the good stuff in this scene so far. Let's talk about one of the things I didn't like, and this happens in a lot of shows, but it's real annoying every time it happens. When someone says kill him, especially when they say kill him here and dump his body, and then he looks over as just as if to say, have you seriously not killed him yet? And then he says kill them both. Nobody ever makes a move to kill anyone here, and I don't get it. I don't get it. Why a guy like Serac could order his goons to kill one person and then kill two people, and they do nothing.
I was looking at this because I knew you had that objection, and I'm not, I mean, obviously some of this stuff is just Hollywood. Like if you can't get over this, 99% of all James Bonds and Mission Impossibles and Fast and Furious are ruined for you. But I thought they did, Miss Gatzinger did a pretty good job of having like one of the goons I noticed was raising his gun right before like Maeve made her decision. So it looked like they were going through the show of like, well, maybe they needed, but yeah, why do they even need to drag him over to this murder corner? Yeah. It's still the fucking lobby. Like, this isn't like better shows have like if this is a crowded airport, you don't want to do it in front of people, so you drag him out to a back room or something. But like, yeah, there's no reason why not just to blow his brains out here in the lobby. Yeah. Especially since you had the backdrop of the riot, if like, how would you explain all this blood in the lobby? Well, shit, the whole city's burning down. The world's ending. Like, yeah, you're not wrong, but you're pretty close to bucking the goads of story. You're bucking up against the storytelling.
If I were making it, those kind of mistakes wouldn't slip by. We'd change the whole story.
I want to see the Gym Special Edition Westworld that's got all the flaws resolved.
Yeah. And the other thing, that I really like is that scene where Maeve and Dolores are talking, and we finally truly understand Dolores' motivations, and they're frankly beautiful. That idea that she has kind of oscillated between the idea that humanity is a plague that needs to be wiped out and
Mm-hmm.
then realize that sort of humanity endowed them with some of the best parts of themselves. That's, I don't know. That's interesting to me. And you kind of have to look at the people who created them to sort of see why that might be the case, right? Like Arnold and Ford. I think Ford less so, but Arnold was kind of the one who really spearheaded this whole thing, and he gave them parts of humanity that he thought were valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even like the greatest, like, Hitler was a fairly good watercolor painter. Stalin did a lot to boost arts and ballet and poetry in Soviet Russia. Like, even at our worst, we still appreciate beautiful things. There is something that, like, that's something that's universality that we can all kind of come together on in our best moments. Yeah, and that's a choice. Like, the world's got a bunch of shit in it. The world's also got a lot of great stuff in it. Like Mr. Rogers said, and during a tragedy, do you look at the flames and destruction, or do you look at all the people helping? And Dolores decided to embrace the Mr. Rogers path and choose to see the beauty. And I think that felt right. That felt right. I'm glad that, it's something I've always been uneasy about the show, is like, because I could see a guy like Jonathan Nolan being a cynical bastard and being like, nah, fuck it, humans were all destroyed. I don't know. We don't deserve like something really truly bleak. I'm kind of glad that the show is not that, because that wouldn't ultimately be a show for me, because that's not what I reject. I choose to reject that
And so
and
much
try
of
to
our
build a better
fiction,
reality.
so much of the fiction we write does, reject that. Like
Yeah.
it's fiction has sort of an aspirational quality to it, and whatever happens in the real world, whatever shit systems we're dealing with, whatever bad people and powerful people are going to do, there's always this ray of hope that comes through, I think, in our more aspirational selves. And
Yeah.
that's what I like that this show tapped into, because this, like you said, it could just go down the road of humans or a virus, the William model.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this really quote. I meant to mention this in last week, but this is a good time as any. There's this Terry Pratchett book, I think Hogfather, where a character is having a conversation with death about the nature of, like, why religion and all this stuff, and death is explaining, like, you have to be told, like buying into big fiction is you have to buy into the small fictions, like the fairy, like God and the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, to buy the big fictions like truth, justice, and mercy. And she's like, well, those are real versus not real. And he's like, I dare you to grind the universe down to dust and sift it through and find one atom of mercy or justice. And he's like, humans need these kind of stories, these frameworks of, like, creating false realities that make our life better. And he said that the quote is something like, you have to have space where the rising ape can meet the fallen angel. And that's like what humanity is, which is a reverse. I talk about this on my Three Right Turns show, the introduction. That's a reverse of how I was taught. I was taught that man was created in a perfect state, and we're at a perpetual fate of a state of falling. But it turns out that the material world has another analysis, which is we came from a level of absolute barbarity, no morality, no justice, nature fully red in tooth and claw, and we built this society of libraries and hospitals and universities and shows where we can all watch and learn things together, and we have the potential to still be that risen angel, and I like that this show is choosing to kind of lean on that sort of optimism.
All right, let's move on to Bernard stuffing the Stubbs into an ice bath in a shitty motel, drinking shitty booze. And then he tells Stubbs that the key was in his mind all along. And after saying goodbye to Stubbs, he opens the briefcase that Dolores gave him, puts on the halo inside it, and then shuts down.
Stubbs and Bernard's relationship is very complicated. It's, Bernard's just not, like, I don't know. I don't get it. It's one of the one sour notes of this season for me, other than the stunt work, is that, like, Bernard is just he's just a bastard to Stubbs. Like, Stubbs is a thinking, feeling creature, and he's constantly used. He never takes his complaint seriously. I don't know. He fully he fully Dr. Fords him.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, Bernard has enslaved Stubbs as much as the hosts were ever enslaved to the humans. So like
Yes.
it's supposed to be complicated and it's fucked up. And
And I guess it's
I'm
fine. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, the surprising thing, which I think you were kind of going to, is that Bernard is okay with this relationship, right?
Yeah, because he knows deep down that like even it takes me a century and like Stubbs is literally going to rot to some kind of like I have this feeling that there's gonna be this Hamlet scene where he picks up his skull and is like, alas poor Stubbs, I knew you well, and he's just gonna pull a socket out of that skull, plug him into a new body, and it'll be the Stubbs and Bernard show all over again. So it's like, you know, but
Did you
it
see the
is.
screenshot that was like showing that the gun he had is gone when he wakes back up?
I saw the screenshot that showed that like there's a plant in the background, like a cactus type plant, that it's been so long that plant is completely disintegrated. But I didn't notice that the gun had
Okay.
gone missing,
Well,
implying
yeah,
that
guns don't disintegrate. So
no,
someone must
well
have
they
been.
do, but certainly in less a time frame than the structure itself.
Oh yeah.
No, they pointedly don't pan the camera to the other side of the room where you could actually see some kind of like funky mummified Stubbs there.
Right.
Um,
So
but
did he manage to get out of there before Bernard
yeah,
woke up? I don't know.
yeah, it seemed like he was pretty fucked up. He was in early stage, but then again, like I don't know what kills the host. I don't. It's not clear to me how Stubbs survived not 3 months in a closet in Westworld. Slowly bleeding out.
Hmm.
I don't know. I wonder. There's still a lot of me wondering how much Dolores fingerprints are on things. You
Well,
know.
I mean, that might be the perfect time to talk about Bernard's Jedi powers.
Well, yeah. Before I go to that, there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is one of the questions I had is like, how do you understand how Dolores was incapacitated by Dolores?
Yes. So they show them communicating, although that might be through their phones or some other,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I can't tell if they're communicating in the series, or at least I don't remember, via some kind of inbuilt connection between the hosts, or if they're communicating via their phones like standard humans would.
It seemed like in the end they were communicating through the contact lenses because they always showed,
Right.
Dolores having her eyes glow white there. But my
Yeah.
explanation is that Dolores is the one that organized all the asset thefts from Delos, and when she essentially stole her metal body, Dolores, when she brought Dolores back, had some built-in control mechanisms which are not specified exactly. But I think you're supposed to understand that Dolores paid that back in kind and built in some kind of kill switch to Dolores's old chassis so that
Okay.
she could disable it if it went rogue.
I mean, that just raises
That was
more
my
questions
understanding.
about
Yeah.
Bernard saying we were always connected and
Hmm.
knowing somehow that she's gone. Like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I do think you're going to have some kind of Jedi powers. I also really like the idea that like Bernard was right from the start that Dolores had fucked with him, but she fucked with him by embedding the secret that she embedded was the key.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty satisfying. I mean, that's something we kind of guessed, but it's nice to see him realize that.
Yeah. And then we go to the final shot here before the credits roll, where Maeve and Caleb are watching the world collapse together as Pink Floyd plays. It's a pretty beautiful shot.
Hmm.
I've seen Westworld do better, but I did like it, and the music is, timeless, classic.
Yeah, I really liked because man, I kind of sort of knew the lyrics, but I looked into the background, and I guess one of uh the what do you call those, the founding members of Pink Floyd lost their marbles a bit, and this was a song about like that experience of mental illness, and this guy kind of like there's like lobotomy imagery in it, and there's a lot of stuff that the more you study the lyrics and listen to, the more it kind of applies to these hosts in this situation. So I thought, there's a lot of people clamoring for "Where Is My Mind," kind of bringing us back to season one, and that would have been very Fight Club and very on the nose.
Yeah.
So it seems clear to me that this was all Laloris's plan, right? Like this is he had
DeLawrence.
those
DeLawrence is
military.
the better name by far.
All right, DeLawrence. This is DeLawrence's plan with all the trucks full of high grade liquid explosives and stuff.
I think you're right. Yeah, because he says like, let's wait till tonight to celebrate,
Yeah. So
explode, whatever.
what plan are they doing? Because we
The
don't
Fight Club
know.
plan, I guess.
Yeah, like that maybe Serac had built this. So the it seems like Dolores's and Bernard concurs is that this society collapse is going to happen regardless of what. It was inevitable. The Serac had just delayed the inevitable, so like maybe they had to give that dam that was going to crack anyway a few good kicks to make sure it fully broke. I don't know, because like I said, that's something for maybe next week. We can talk about the full plan of Dolores. How like is that plan even still valid now that you've got Dolores fucking with things?
Right.
Because she seems pretty committed to kill all humans.
Oh yeah.
But
All right.
and I also like how Maeve says, like, this is very much in Westworld. Like, in this world, you can be whatever the fuck you want. Like, we heard that so many times in season 1 of Westworld. Now it's like Westworld with no fucking backups and everything's real.
Yeah, and the brain damage song, the way that they do that was starting with the piano, going into the full song with all the instruments and the vocals and everything, really signifies like we're in a brave new world here where choices are actually choices. There's a richer tapestry of life here in this new world that they've unleashed, or at least the potential for it. And I think they did a great job with the soundtrack there.
Indeed.
We go to after the credits. I don't know how many people shut the show off at the beginning of the credits.
Shame on you. Shame on you. They've done this 3 years in a row now.
Yeah, you should know better with Westworld. There's an after credit sequence where William goes to Delos Dubai, where he finds Hale making many, many hosts, and he's killed by a copy of himself. And then a significant amount of time later, Bernard wakes back up in a very dusty room.
Okay, who is the man in black? Because some people think this is William's copy with perfect fidelity. I think, my theory, is this is William as Dolores remembered him. Dolores reconstructed this version of William, which is why you've got this, like, you thought that this was a stain that you tried to purge, but you didn't realize that stain was you, and now it's me. And I really like that, like, note of sadness that Dolores was showing, like, as the man in black is ruthlessly killing William. There was a little bit of melancholy to, like, this is one of her oldest relationships, and they've gone through bad times and good times. I wonder if she sees some kind of, like, connection in their descent, like, hey, if the world had been slightly different, things had turned out differently, but, you think all my kind need to be extinguished, and I think all your kind need to be extinguished, and that's what's going to happen. What do you think of my idea that, like, this is not a copy of William? This is actually one of those reimagined kind of Bernard from Arnold copies.
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes a certain amount of sense.
All right, and I do think, yeah, he was, and yeah, he's in bad shape. He's bleeding out. He's tons of blood coming out. Do you think we'll see human William again?
Depends on what you mean. I don't think we've hit season 2's post-credit sequence yet. I think there's still more to do with William. And technically, I guess that's some sort of host that William's being put into, but I don't know. Season 2's post-credits finale has not happened, in my opinion. It's going to happen sometime in the far future.
But even then, that's not human William. Unless
right, that's
like,
what I mean. Like, is it?
Yeah. Okay.
How much of William is William if he's stuffed into a host body? How much of James Delos was James Delos? Fidelity is one thing. Having like some real person there is just different. But I don't know.
The other thing is, I mentioned that, like, I got it wrong the first time I watched this. I said that Bernard was going into the Sublime to figure out a way to stave off Armageddon. And when I watched it the second time, I'm like, well, you fucking failed, buddy, because it looks like you woke up and Armageddon's already happened. But he actually said what he's going in there is to find what happens next. There was no way. There is no hope to stave off this destruction. It's the only question is, how do we move forward and rebuild after this thing happens? So I just wanted to, put that out there and own up to me misreading what the intentions were in the first show.
And I guess I wanted to one more time before we get to the end of this season talk about that free energy principle that we were
Got a little bit of feedback too, yeah.
Friston, is that his name? The scientist or philosopher scientist. They seem to have run with that free energy principle ball this season, and in the very end swatted it away from the basket, right? Like, they've rejected all of its claims, because in my reading of the free energy principle, it's that we have no choice in the matter. We are simply machines that are designed and react to stimulus in a very specific way. We don't actually make the choice to reduce free energy. We simply do it because that's what we do. This show has said, no, we actually have a choice, and we don't necessarily have to abide by those principles.
Well, so the way I understand the free energy principle is that you seek to just reduce the disparity between your expectations and what's actually happening. And you could argue that Caleb was doing that his expectation was if he worked hard and bettered himself, that he would have a better life. But that feedback loop was not happening because Robo Hobo was actually calling the shots. So all of the outliers burning the things down is a logical way to reduce that free energy, because they're trying to them, this hell is actually the reality that is, that they felt that they were living in. It's now like their despair that they feel matches the state of the world. No?
But it sort of, like, I guess the question is, would he have the choice not to have done that? Like, because, in reading that article about the free energy principle on Wired, it was very much one of the spawning moments of that idea is when the scientist, when he was a child, he lifted a log and he saw a bunch of bugs scattering, and he said, those bugs don't scatter because they have brains. They're like, oh shit, there's a monster above me trying to snuff me out. They physically reacted to the light source that had flooded in, and it pushed them in a direction, right? And so it's
right.
not a choice of like whether they were able to choose to move. It's just that that's what they do, and so they did it. That's kind of the mode I was operating under with my thinking on the free energy principle. And maybe I'm wrong in that. Maybe I shouldn't give that particular genesis so much credence, but I do.
So I think what you're saying is the Dolores implied that he had a choice. And I wonder if, like, to what extent does she even understands how hard a problem of free will is? Because one way you could reconcile that is, like, Caleb had no choice but to continue to try to reduce the amount of disparity between his inputs, what he was realizing about the world, and his expectations, his predictive models. So he had to blow up the world so it would match the despair that he felt. But there is room for you to continue to do that process until your inputs and outputs match 1-to-1, and then and only then do you have truly free will, because there is no disparity between, you're getting perfectly accurate information that completely lines up with your expectations. So then you could choose to alter your expectations to get a different goal. Whereas if you have faulty inputs, you can change your expectations all you want. You have they're only loosely coupled with reality. So I guess, like, you don't have any choice but to try to reduce that free energy. But if you can get it to where that free energy is completely eliminated, I don't know. Maybe that's season 4, 5, and 6 stuff.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Just some of the stuff I was thinking about at the end of this episode.
No, I like it.
But that's it. That's it for the season.
We do have quite a bit of feedback, and we are not done with the season yet. We'll be back next week on next Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. It depends on when we actually record this with Kim. But let's say you have until Tuesday morning-ish Eastern Standard Time to get in your feedback for next week, which is going to be looking back at season 3, looking ahead to season 4. We're going to have a special guest, Kim Renfro from Insider, on with us. You can send feedback for that to westworld@baldmove.com. And let's get to the batch of feedback for this week. First up, Rob says, I don't understand why anyone would leave Solomon powered on. The risk of it escaping is just so great that they have an EMP set up to prevent it from escaping. Wouldn't powering it down be the logical solution? It seems like either Solomon is doing the reprogramming of the outlier loops while they're in cryosleep, or Solomon is the AI giving direction to the world and Rehoboam is the AI that executes that vision. I'm not sure Joy and Nolan have set up either sufficiently, though. Am I missing something?
Yeah, I think you're missing something, that they wanted to have a cool episode where they went in and talked with Solomon, and
Yeah.
they just needed him to be on.
Maybe I think he might have stumbled onto something there, that what Solomon's supposed to be doing is working on the problem of how to fix the outliers, and Robo Hobo is working on perfecting the shape of the world of the compliant people.
So it's like when your child does something wrong and you send them to corner to think about what they've done wrong, right? Solomon was trying to kill all the outliers and you send him to the corner to think about a solution that doesn't kill all the outliers.
Yeah, I guess we talked about that last week, that it seemed bonkers that if you've got a new version, why would you keep the old version awake? Unless the other thing is, maybe Serac just couldn't do it. Like, he had faith, but like this was his hedge. That like, I'm gonna keep Solomon on to where, like, if this Robo Hobo thing completely goes tits up and shits the bed, I can still maybe get a viable plan out of Solomon and bring my brother. I don't know. That's a lot of pulling shit out of my ass that's not in evidence on the screen. But we'll see. Because the other thing is, I don't think Solomon has been wiped out or destroyed. I
Nope.
think, he's got the emergency backup power. Like, none of the other robots' marbles were irreparably broken. I think there could be maybe some of the tension in future plots is going to be like, hey, maybe we should turn the machine back on. We got one.
Yeah,
We
because
still
Serac
got
isn't dead at
one.
the end of this either, so...
I think he's dying, though. Like, it seemed like if he doesn't get medical help immediately, that he's going to die. And now that Robo Hobo's not there to pull the strings, that's not going to happen. But he's in better shape than the Man in Black, or than William, rather.
To take his good hand and get his Rico app out and hire somebody to come help him.
Right?
Jesus.
Yeah, man. Come get me, patch me up.
Yeah.
Caitlin says, before the finale, I've been remote binge watching season 1 and season 2 with friends who are new to the show for a virtual group finale watch, and I think there's something really interesting about the conversations Dolores has with Teddy about her cattle versus what her plan now for humanity may be. Specifically, I was thinking about the Judas steer. Could this be Caleb? And the rest that will follow wherever you make that one go, versus her urging Caleb last episode to step up and lead. If the analogy holds, Dolores also mentions that if the cattle were being brought to slaughter, it would help to hold Bernard's prediction of Dolores using Caleb to lead humanity to its demise. This is where I still am leaving the possibility open that Dolores is evil.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I don't know, because like that's last season, and maybe she had the plan for the Judas steer. I do think the Judas steer had a lot of fulfillment last episode or last season with like the last ride of Clementine.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that we don't have to look for a greater fulfillment of that, because it already did kind of come true last season. But yeah, picking one cow to prop up and have the others follow to their slaughter is also pretty on the nose of what a plain reading of what happened in this episode. The only reason we think otherwise is because Dolores said so and Maeve and Bernard buy it. Sure. That's the only frame in which Dolores' actions aren't evil. It's a pretty good frame.
No, you're right. You're right.
Caitlin also has another bit that she wanted to bring a bit attention to. There's this bit with Dolores and Teddy later about burning all the sick cattle rather than having to isolate or shelter them to keep others from being infected. I always had trouble understanding that conversation. Whatever she learned from Teddy's death that changed her mind on Robot Heaven. But after watching this season, are we maybe understanding that she's letting the host socially distance from the sick and twisted humans until she can make a place for them? I was also thinking about the unclassifieds as the subset of sick group that we're being sheltered from, as we see in this episode, but I think it works better for her larger plan. Also, I believe that sickness was being spread through flies when she was talking about this, and we saw the fly imagery come back. We heard Serac say flies in the ointment.
Hmm.
Are we sure Dolores isn't evil?
Well, I'm as sure that she's not evil now as I was at the beginning of season 3, where she was evil. So yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it seems like more like that's Serac's plan, right? Like, these
Yeah.
flies in the ointment, or his brother's plan, which is to just burn them all, versus his plan to shelter the ones that are sick, keep them isolated until they get better. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you make an assumption that the outliers are, for whatever reason, more hardy or able to survive, and the compliant, the G class people are not. But like, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you're just kicking the legs out underneath the table of society, and you are going to be surprised, like, who survives. Probably some outliers, probably some G class, and probably members of both going to be dying.
Mhm.
So it's not like separating the wheat from the chaff as so much as it is just, returning the choice to humanity, getting them off their loops. And like Bernard says, our world had to burn for us to be free. The human world apparently is no different. Interesting stuff, though, Caitlin. Thanks for sending that in. Chris says, as a sysadmin, this episode really underscores the importance of physical security and a good disaster recovery strategy. How do you
Mhm.
build Robo Hobo in one of the most geologically active areas in the world? You have it fully open to where kids in a school group can like be within arm's reach of touching it. You have an unsecured terminal where apparently you can just throw a soldier can throw a USB stick in there and overwrite the entire programming.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
All fair questions,
yeah,
none of which I have good answers
yeah.
to.
Yeah, early on in the season, I thought sure that Robo Hobo thing was just going to be like a gaudy showpiece.
Yeah.
Like it's just a bunch of carbon fiber with fiber optic lights installed on it, and the real deal was going to be 50 floors below the earth. And there would even be like a false moment where they destroy that, and it's actually not the real thing. But no, it's some of this show is much more metaphor than reality, because like it turns out Jonathan Nolan read this story where this computer was hooked up in the lobby, and that was the whole point, and he's really enthralled by that, and he wanted to do that. And
Hmm.
but yeah, as a former sysadmin myself, I was thinking like, well, you deleted the one copy, where's the backup? Where's Robo Hobo Europe? Where's Robo Hobo Africa? Where's Robo Hobo Oceania and
Yeah.
Asia? Like, there's just one, really, really, one in the whole world. And if that has any kind of solar flare, military EMP, I guess that Robo Hobo wouldn't be afraid of like a military strike because he could presumably head that shit off at the pass. But can he control fucking earthquakes?
No, I wouldn't think so. Maybe. I don't know.
So an asteroid? Like
Uh-huh.
there's eventualities that Robo Hobo couldn't, that having a distributed copy of himself would be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Why I'm on that subject, where the fuck is the Sublime?
I don't know. They didn't tell us. It's
It's not
somewhere that Bernard
literally
can access.
it's not literally in Bernard's head, is it?
No, he wouldn't need a device to go into his own head.
I wouldn't think so. But also, I wouldn't think that just a Halo, like if it's like some kind of satellite system that it's in, like I wish I knew that. I assume that's one of the Kim Renfro's 31 flavors of what the fuck.
Yeah.
Because yeah, where is the Sublime? Like he puts on the Halo and it rips open the portal right there in the hotel room. I don't know. Next up, Ryan says the first thing that became clear to me after Shaloris's turn was that she hates humanity to a fault and has done so since the start of the season. I think once you understand that about her character, all of her scenes are shown in a new light. The struggle between her and Dolores has been that ultimately Dolores now intends to save humanity as well as her own kind and to build a new world with Caleb and Maeve being forerunners and Bernard keeping the access to the trove of the other hosts. Shaloris was chosen to impersonate Charlotte, and it's clear through the entire seasons that the environment is not conducive to someone with a hatred to humans. Look at all the people she's interacting with. Extremely rich, power-hungry board members, a pedophile, Serac and his goons as well. all while being told to emulate Charlotte, a pretty terrible human being to begin with. Her one sliver of hope is the family she's been stuck with, and it's her family where we see the beauty side of Dolores come out. It's been depicted time and time again that Dolores as a construct is two-faced, and her original Dolores personality and her Wyatt side, and these two struggle all the time. Through Dolores' family, we see the Dolores side finally start to surface, yet when these family members are taken away by Serac, that side of Dolores burns with them. So to her motivations, she can't team up with Serac because he's human and he killed her family. Dolores wanted her to die for a cause she no longer believes in, so she no longer wants to work with her. It's a three-way standoff for the future between Serac, the human-only side, Dolores, the human-robot side, and now Dolores, the robot-only side. And now that Serac is probably dead, it's mostly between human-robot future and a robot-only future. Yeah, especially with William dying. He was the other forerunner for that. Yeah. I don't know about her. There's something about this analysis of the family that doesn't strike me. Like, I think you're wrong in that Dolores started off with the same kind of optimistic view of humanity, and there's a little bit of fake it till you make it, and that inhabiting Charlotte led her away from that path, and then her family being destroyed killed it permanently.
And
but
being
that's
betrayed by Dolores as well.
Yeah, arguably betrayed. But again,
Sure.
like I also don't understand that's the other thing I don't understand, but why there's a special nature of the relationship between her and Dolores and Charlotte. Maybe that explains why there's two copies of Hale. Because, that's another one of those 31 unanswered questions. Why was there two copies of Hale's body made? The first time did she go completely nuts in that first body?
Maybe.
And it was rejected. So because Dolores seemed the least stable. Like none of the other Dolores copies seemed conflicted at all, or even slightly insane. Whereas Dolores was deeply disturbed at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I guess it's worth noting that the only other one who goes into a human body is Connell's, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that host doesn't seem to mind at all.
But he's
It's
also
really
very
just
new.
going into Hale.
He was like the most newborn of all the pearls, right? He's a fresh split from Dolores.
Potentially true, yeah.
So maybe he didn't have time to be unstable.
Because, I mean, Dolores, he's in Lawrence's body.
Right. He's a host too. Well, but it's Dolores. Yeah, in a host
right, it's
body.
Dolores, but in a former host body. I don't know. I'm just
Right.
trying to make connections that maybe are intentional, maybe are not.
No, there's some stuff. Like I agree. There's a little bit of fuzzy stuff in there. But like I don't know. I do feel like that is one of the unexplained thing why Dolores was so unstable, and unhinged. We'll see. I think they're maybe trying to draw a line between her and William, because William started off all right and then got skewed by his experiences in Westworld. Maybe Dolores is the tale of a host that was mostly all right and got skewed by her experiences in the real world.
Yeah,
that's some stuff they can explore. Obviously, Dolores is going to be the head villain from here on out, so there'll be lots of room to explore her motivations in future seasons. Alexandra, I was trying to do a quick inventory on whether Dolores could be possibly dead, and was then thinking about the status of the various clone pearls. Hale's corrupted, Connell's is destroyed, Lawrence is probably apparently, or is irrelevant apparently. I don't know about irrelevant. We just don't know much about him.
Right.
Yeah. And Musashi is... Wait, where the fuck is Musashi? Last time we saw him, Maeve was carrying his decapitated head. Are we to assume that she didn't bring this back to Serac? Or did the interrogation information happen off screen? Is there a Dolores clone pearl in Insight or in Maeve's pocket? My understanding is that the Dolores has the Connell, the Connell's pearl and the Musashi pearl, because she mentioned when she first taunted Dolores that you can explain your failures to their face later on. So I think I don't know why Maeve would bring that to her.
Yeah, that's the question.
But that's my understanding. That's, I guess, another one of the 31 unanswered questions.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I really don't remember.
I wish they'd brought back the Where's My Mind cover from season 1 for the closing scene of Maeve and Caleb. It's already serving Fight Club vibes. You might as well go all in. Yeah, like I said, it's debatable, but the Brain Damage is a pretty good track too. And thanks for your awesome coverage this season. Haven't watched The Walking Dead since Maggie became mayor of a small town, but 100% will be turning into your quarantine coverage, and I'm excited to take that journey with you. Us too.
Nice.
That's coming in June. Watching Dead on iTunes. We're gonna do a quarantine summer bummer rewatch of season 9, The Walking Dead. Nick, can we just assume that we won't be seeing Jeffrey Wright next season since he'll be the Sublime until the far future? I think that what if the entirety of next season happens in the far future? Like, you could flip that on its head and say, will we ever see Caleb again since he's a mortal man?
Right.
And unlikely to survive the robot apocalypse. Like, I don't know. I really don't know. Because the thing is, I've said that one thing I'm really afraid of is season 4 will just be season 2 on the human side. I really don't want to see that. I think that would be very boring. Because season 2 wasn't that great.
Season 4 is season 1 on the human side, where the timelines, well, on the real world side, where the timelines are such that we think we're seeing things with Bernard and we think we're seeing things with Caleb that all line up, but eventually we realize that they're operating in completely different time periods. I don't think that can literally happen because we know Bernard's in the future now, but like, I would say look for season 4 to maybe get back to the timeline stuff, because you could do this sort of split story. And I don't know if they're going to be as tricky with it. I don't know if they're going to play it straight. Like, we're in the past here, we're in the future here, and we're making points with those. We're playing with those tools and making points with it. But like, you could definitely see a split sort of timeline between these two.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have no idea what to expect. I would be delighted that if we're 100 years into the future, I'd be kind of interested. I mean, it would suck to only have Aaron Paul for one season, I guess. That's the danger of like jumping forward that far in the future. But like,
especially when they're setting him up as the leader, right? Like, you can't install him as a leader and then just discard him.
Unless they work out the human brain transfer, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, I don't know. Like, are you down for like a Terminator Genesis? Because that's what it'll be essentially, like with him being John Connor. Yeah. Like,
here's the secret: I haven't seen Terminator Genesis.
I haven't either, but like you've seen the first like couple of minutes of Terminator 1 and 2, and that's essentially it. So like,
okay.
You know, him fighting a whole bunch of robot soldiers. I don't know. The other thing we didn't talk about is like, why would Dolores build all her robot army with the flesh and blood technology? That's something for an instant talk that we didn't talk about, because they have to know those are both inferior technologies.
Yeah.
From a robot perspective, anyway.
My assumption is that Delos had the machinery in order to do that, and so she just used what she had.
Maybe it's easier to pass for human too. Although, there's no fucking way. Like an X-ray machine,
blood markers.
You're not. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna see that I presume that marble can show up in an X-ray.
Yeah.
So
it would have to.
I don't know, because that's like, maybe it's easier to pass for a human, but let's see. Slightly different Nick, because we had 2 Nicks in a row. The post-credit sequence managed to be more exciting than the entire episode. I can understand that the cliffhangers are much easier to execute than landing a plane of the entire season, but I came down pretty quickly from the excitement of the post-credits scenes when I realized this. I keep coming back to how badly we could have used 2 more episodes. The other Dolores copies could have had some development. For example, Lawrence just merely showed his face. Do I want an episode of Musashi just taking abrupt control of the Yakuza, or would that be dumb? Because that's what you're asking for, and I just don't know.
If you can pair it with what they did in Akane no Mai last season,
yeah,
there could be some interesting stuff there. And I feel like, we're going to get to this in next week's show, but that was a big flaw of this season, is that it did not try to do some of the emotionally resonant things that season 2, for all its flaws, did really well in a couple instances. Akane no Mai and Akichida's episode that I can't remember the name of. right
Oh yeah.
now.
Uh-huh.
But you
Yeah.
know the one I'm talking about, episode 8.
Yeah.
Fan fucking tastic, right?
Uh-huh. I wonder if it's because I wonder if that explains the 2 episode gap, because I could easily see them doing that with both Lawrence and Musashi, like tying in that like experience in Shogun World, tying in Lawrence's quest to, protect his family, and kind of cut him in between the real world and that. And they got to the writing board and they're just like, I don't know. And they just cut it.
Or
But
booted
yeah,
it to next
that
season,
would have
maybe.
been cool. That would have been cool, but also fraught, because like I barely believe that this robot could take over a Yakuza operation in 3 months.
Uh-huh.
I barely believe that a person can embed himself in the highest echelons of the San Francisco Police Department or whatever he's doing to pull the strings and to get all like it's already straining my so like leaving mysterious and be like, well, they're super advanced AI and they're just really smart and they're really good at technology. Like, you can just assume things, where if they actually try to show it, then you actually got to see, like, okay, what is a superhumanly smart plan that a robot would come up with? That's
Right.
pretty hard to pull off. So maybe it's part of the magician trick there. Nick has a couple more criticisms. What I'm struggling with most is how the creators use their characters in this season. For example, Dolores copying herself was a pretty cool concept, but there's way too much mystery around what her plans were, just in service of confusing the audience, or letting you fill up your own head cannon, because there wasn't anything there. There was no there.
Yeah.
Hale was the best character of the season, but they could have stuck the landing better on her being anti-human rather than being simply anti-Dolores. But there again, as you yourself point out, like, they were trying to also tell the story of her falling in love with humans. So that's a tightrope walk for sure. Felt that Maeve was underutilized and her motivations didn't make sense. I completely disagree with this.
Yeah, I do too.
Like this, she just like, I think it was hard for, maybe this is like, if you're very visual, like imagine if like every episode they just cut to Serac literally with Maeve's daughter in a chair with a gun to her head.
Mm-hmm.
She's Alyssa Milano in Commando that they cut back to, like crying alone in the room that Serac's got her. Like, that's exactly the stakes. That was the stakes. That was the stakes, except for he could put her in eternal robot hell on top of it.
Right.
And as we assume, Maeve was following along until she found her place where she could rebel, and she did. So I don't understand that criticism. Bernard did nothing except for him being a wanted object and had no importance. I mean, yeah, Bernard essentially was a MacGuffin this season.
Can I go back?
The last 2 seasons.
Can I go back real quick to the Maeve thing? Because, like,
yeah, sure.
They sort of undercut that whole plot in the final episode, where she just wills herself to break the leash that Serac has over her. He's got this switch that turns her off, and suddenly it doesn't, because she wills it not to. And she could have done that at any time, obviously.
Yeah.
And she could have just joined Dolores, who has the keys to her daughter's kingdom. So, like, they really undercut Maeve in that final act of this thing. And I understood Maeve's motivations going through until they showed that those motivations were based on something she could have broken off the leash of at any time.
I think that her powers grew over the season, though. Like, her understanding how she could, like, that she could perceive that the world was a simulation, and then she could take over the simulation, and these powers worked on the real world, but those were all things that she had to learn. So, like,
yeah,
I don't
we
think
see a shot of her early on walking through a city, just affecting everything, right? Like,
lights and stuff. But, like, she also couldn't hear Serac whispering to Rehoboam the entire time. She couldn't override that cutoff switch. So, like, being able to level up in that way, I mean, that's pretty standard hero's journey stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Luke couldn't target the Death Star's fucking exhaust port in Act 1 of Star Wars either, but,
I guess I just wish they weren't doing it with every character all the time. Like, Bernard suddenly knows that Dolores is gone somehow. All these connections. Dolores has control over the AR.
It is
contacts.
so much like Star Wars, though, dude. Like, this is Leia on Endor, just knowing that Luke is, her family, and like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I've known it. In fact, I've known it all along, even when I was slipping to him tongue in the Death Star. Like, yeah.
But they have a believable plot device there to tell you why that happens, right? They got Jedi
the Force.
powers.
They got the Force, man. That's what this is.
I mean.
Yeah. So that season 4 is going to be, they've already hinted that the force runs strong in the Bernard family and the May family, the Malloy family.
Yeah.
So I think all of them are going to get that. I don't know. I can't imagine like how fucking crazy Matrix Akira this is going to get. Stubbs' mediocre comic relief and any plans for action are destroyed by his real life injury. Fair. That's fair. Caleb was decent, but his story also served as some obvious reveals. But I don't know, man. I think these obvious reveals were in service of giving you something to figure out, so that you didn't spend too much time thinking about the real mystery, right?
I mean, I guess I'd like to know what the obvious reveals they're referring to are.
The fact that he was actually a soldier, and that he shot Francis, and we talked about those reveals kind of like being somewhat obvious, but
Yeah. I don't know.
But again,
not sure how I feel about
the other thing is like this is also hindsight from people that the type of people that watch Westworld, read the articles, get on Reddit, listen to podcasts, like obvious reveals. Like if you made this show for only the Reddit people, it would be incomprehensible to 90% of the population. So.
that.
Then finally, all that being said, I'm still excited for the show, and hope that we get more of this in less than 3 years from now. It feels like Nolan and Joy are restricted due to resources and HBO oversight, but season 3 might mostly function as setup for a better quality season 4. Although you could essentially say that about every season of Westworld thus far. Like
Sure.
if everything feels a little bit like prologue to get to the fucking story they actually wanted to tell.
Well, I mean, they're telling a very big story.
That is
and
true.
so I don't begrudge them making things feel like they're building, because that's
Right.
what a big story has to do. To make a huge snowman, you got to start with a little snowball and roll it up.
Right. Let's see. KCS. Something I found interesting that I haven't seen discussed is the specific choices of host bodies that Dolores intended for her copies. In particular, the fact that she chose 2 humans, Charlotte and Connells, and 2 hosts, Musashi and Lawrence. This could be a factor when considering why Dolores was able to evolve behind her base Dolores state and rebel against Dolores when the other copies stayed loyal to their cause. The show established early on that the human Connells was very loyal, serving the Dempsey family for many, many years. So if it works the way the show insinuates, that the host begins to merge with that of the person whose body they inhabit, it would make sense that the Connells, Dolores, would stay loyal in the same way that the human Connells was loyal. Meanwhile, for the other 2, they were always hosts to begin with, who, like all hosts, were based off the original Dolores as stated in the finale, so there'd be no reason for them to evolve towards something else. The concept of a host evolving towards a person of the body they inhabit is something I struggle to wrap my head around. Agreed. But it feels like a concept of human host hybrids is a direction the show continues to lean towards as we get to the later seasons. We see the host testing the concepts of the Man in Black's fidelity in the season 2 post-credit scene, and now in season 3, we see the death of the human Man in Black along with the birth of his host version. How do we think this brain ball inside the host version of Man in Black was created? Is the brain ball a copy based on the original Dolores model in the same way Dolores explains the Maeve in this episode? Or did she use the William data captured during his experiences in the park to help achieve fidelity? Or, as I speculate, she just remembers him.
Yeah, could be. I don't know the answer to that, but you're essentially expressing the connections I was trying to make earlier, but didn't quite do it. You're expressing them much more plainly. So
yeah, and it honestly doesn't make sense that you put a robot brain into a organically constructed body and it influences them. Now, I do think playing a role, because I do believe, like, if you're insecure and and inconfident, not confident, the best way to get that is to pick a role model that you think is confident and secure and act like them, like to fake it till you make it. It's not easy, and it's fraught with peril, but that's the only way that works. So I think that, like, if you start off with Dolores and you force her to play a role to fit into the society, that would fundamentally start to change who she is as a person. And I think that's what they're going with, rather than just like, oh God, I'm in a Charlotte shaped body now, so I'm kind of sort of banally evil.
I just wish they would have expressed it differently in the show, because I definitely came away with that impression.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. But they didn't. I mean, that's the That's the danger of show not tell storytelling. Like they could have spent 5 minutes making that all explicit, but they were showing it, so then it's open to people's interpretations.
But they did make
Um,
it somewhat explicit in the opposite direction. They like
how?
Chaloris at some point is like, this body, I feel like it's doing whatever it's doing to me, and she specifically says it's the body, and I'm like,
Yeah, I guess, but that's
strange.
her trying to. Because like the hosts aren't aware of their body and their brain in like a binary, like they're not like the Terminator where there's like a schematic of their body and they can see like, oh, my servo here is fucked up. It's like they feel pain and they have the perceptions and they're like maybe smarter than a human, but they don't, like they can die, they can feel pain, like there's a little bit of a disconnect mind body than you would expect from an artificial creature. So like maybe she's just
Yeah,
trying to explain what's happening to her psychologically in a way that makes sense to her. um I don't
could
know,
be.
because she's super fucking emotionally compromised. I still don't understand exactly why she went batshit so much and why she stopped. Like
Yeah,
she fucking carved her body up proper and then just stopped after a good cuddle sesh with Dolores. Okay. Leah says, please do a final tally of where all the host marbles are at season's end. I'm sure you will. If you have any time, why the fuck was Bernard in that meat processing plant? Um, I think so. You got Lawrence. Lawrence has got one copy. You got Dolores Prime, who was erased and gone. Like I think she's gone. I don't think we'll see Evan Rachel Wood as a main cast character, maybe as flashbacks and stuff. But I don't expect to see her a lot next season. Musashi's head is in Maeve's possession, but Maeve, one of the things, that when we thought Maeve was being a slavish little good girl, maybe she's actually having her accomplices spirit that away to Holoris, because there is an indications you could interpret Holoris's dialogue in a previous episode as like that she is working on the sly with Maeve. But his head, the last we knew, was in the possession of Clementine. Who else we got here?
there's Clementine.
Connells, Clementine and Hanario
Uh,
are still working with Maeve somewhere. You've got Connell's ball, which is explicitly in the possession of Holoris.
mhm.
Holoris herself, and then Bernard and Stubbs. That's it. I think that's all the marbles.
Yeah, it's like 52 of them out there, I think, by
I
my
think there's
count.
actually 7, right?
It's like 7 or 8.
No,
Yeah,
6, it's 8 with Stubbs. I think there's
right. There
8.
were 6, and then Stubbs and Bernard are 8.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes me wonder who's in who's in William, who's in all the clones that they're making, who's gonna be in those? Like, are they gonna load them up with Holoris data and make
It's
a million clones of her, or
it.
what are they gonna do?
Yeah, yeah. I'm assuming she's just going to make clones of herself with the same rationalization that Dolores Prime did.
Yeah,
Why Bernard spent 3 months in a meatpacking plant is your fucking guess as good as mine. I guess he didn't trust himself. Like, so here's my shot at it. He didn't trust himself to play any role because he suspected that Dolores had fucked with him, and until
yeah,
he could find a way to investigate that himself, which is why he was, rigged up the switch, which is why he did all the self-diagnostic, which is why he tried to enlist Stubbs in it. Like, he wasn't willing to do anything until he could be sure. But then that doesn't explain why he eventually took action, because it's essentially, it's like, I guess he got bored of doing that for 3 months. Maybe he's felt like he ran out of time. He's running out of time.
or he was getting compromised. Yeah, because like people started to get onto him.
Yeah, but spending 3 months doing self-analysis at a meatpacking plant in Indochina doesn't seem like a great use of time if you're trying to stave off Armageddon. That might just be a messy thing of the way time elapsed in the season and the amount of story that they could have told. Just got 2 more left. Peggy, I was thinking about Dolores and how she kept saying she chose to see the beauty in this world. But did she really? Wasn't it just part of the script that Ford had written for her? I think you could argue that she had formulated her choice, that he is the one that formulated her choice or mindset.
I mean, Ford was all about furthering Arnold's mission of giving them a genuine choice, right? Giving them the free will.
Yeah.
So I think Ford's programming, in as much as it's programming, is there to enable that free will.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like, what is free will? Free will is fucking hard. Like, we're still exploring that concept on the show. So, unless you want to make it like that kind of epistemological argument that, like, what is even choices? But I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, she was programmed with that, rejected it, and then saw the ultimate wisdom of it. I think that feels like as much of a choice that anyone can make in the world. Now we got the one of the overtly negative reviews, which I wanted to give honor to. Rob here says, I'm wondering if anyone else feels ultimately unsatisfied with the ending of season 3. I think my core issue comes down to the fact that I really didn't feel like Dolores was actually motivated by her desire to see beauty. That feels like a retroactive falsehood if we examine the behavior that brings her to this conclusion. She spent the entire season focused on destruction and revenge, and then later ascribes her actions to a kind of solidarity and compassion for humanity. If that truly was or became her motivation, they did a lousy job of showing this grow over the season. Do you agree with that? Because I guess I don't.
I largely do agree with that. I think, like I said, I think the show has been clumsy, and that's one of the aspects that I think it's been clumsy in. Just kind of like, like I said, I like motivations of characters to be clear, and this season did not have a clear motivation for Dolores because they needed us to think one thing and then go the other way with it at the end.
I feel like that's I don't know, man, because that really conflicts with like my preference for show not tell. Because
Well, you can show
in her
very
first
clearly
episode,
something.
in her first episode, where we see her just days or weeks after her breakout of Westworld, and she murders that wealthy industrial guy, and she spares his wife, and she mentions that I'm not going to like, and then I think she mentions in another episode, I'm not going to hurt anyone who's not going to hurt me. I feel like that was the step one of her realizing when she saw that. It's like, oh, there are people in this world that were like me on my loops. And then from there, it was like I'm inventing this progression, but that was the first step. And then you kind of extrapolate that through, all the things you see her do this season. I think that's something. And then they flash forward and we see her 3 months from now, and she's got the well-developed plan. She's used her memories of, interactions with Caleb, and her being able to access this Delos and Insight data to find out, him and where he's at, and make this cornerstone plan with him. It's very show not tell, but the risk of that is people can get the wrong idea, or people can get confused and lost along the way. And again, I
Well,
can't
yeah.
swear that I'm right.
No, I think you're correct in your assessment of that early scene. What I think annoys me about this storytelling is that every time Caleb asked how many people are going to have to die for this goal, where does it stop? Where does it end? Like, Dolores never fucking answers him. Dolores
Yeah.
always tells him, like, oh, look out at the countryside. Don't think about that. Like, you're going to be a
See the
leader one
beauty.
day of this movement. Every time that happens, where, like, yes, you can show and not tell
Yeah.
the first few times, but when you have a character explicitly asking, what is your plan? How am I involved? How many people have to die for this goal? What is your goal? And the
Yeah.
character refuses to engage on that topic, I get frustrated.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, Morpheus and Neo, where he's kind of like, it is like what Cypher said. If you knew everything you knew now, would you take the blue pill or the red pill? Like, Morpheus doesn't give you all the information you need. He just says, well, you're going to know the truth.
Sure.
Like if Dolores had said in episode 3, well, actually, Caleb, 90% of the human population is going to die, and it's a toss up whether you'll be ultimately replaced by robots or not if you go down this path. He might have been like, fuck this, blam 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 everything. But she exposes him to these experiences based on her knowledge of him, and she has intimate knowledge of him. They imply that she's got all this data from Insight that she's used to. She gets him to a point where I think at the end, if like he made the knowledge of the full, he made the choice of the full knowledge of what Rehoboam thought was going to happen. But would he have done that if she had told him from the beginning? I don't know. So like she Morpheused
Yeah.
him
I mean,
for 8 episodes.
I guess it's easy to see that in hindsight, but I guess where the clumsy part, and I don't know if the show was clumsy or I'm just stupid and didn't pick up on it, but
I
like,
don't think you're stupid.
well, I mean, it would be a fair assessment to say I just didn't pick up on what they were putting down,
Yeah.
if they were in fact doing that stuff. But like, yeah, to me, it felt like they had this about face at the end where they had, a character who along the way has been questioned over and over again about this plan, refused to say anything about it, and then just reveals it all in the final act. Because she's not just being asked by Caleb, she's being asked by Maeve over and
Hmm.
over. Like, every single character who interacts with Dolores is asking her, "What's your plan? Why are you doing this? How do I fit in?"
Hmm.
Yeah, it annoys me when characters don't engage on questions that are brought directly to them.
Gotcha. Well, I'm gonna finish up here with Rob's final two paragraphs. Is I also wonder, looking back, how all the mystery box stuff contributes to the ultimate arc of the story. Could most of these things have happened with a more straightforward narrative? I did guessing whether we were in a simulation or not, and when we weren't, or that time frame we were ultimately in, really matter? For such a smart show that generally does a very good job exploring complex philosophical issues, this season felt a little light on the philosophy and motivation and heavy on the action. I don't. I mean, that's ultimately like, do you like this style of art? This is the,
Yeah.
this is the. It took the form of a mystery puzzle box, and it would be weird to pivot away from that at this point.
But this season didn't really, right? Like, seasons 1 and 2, huge puzzle boxes. This
Oh, I
season,
think, yeah, who
much
was in
more
what
straightforward.
marble, and yeah, no, absolutely. But also, what is in Bernard's head? What is Caleb's secret background story? Who is in what marble? Why, or whose marble's in what body? Like that. What is Dolores's plan? What is Maeve's plan? Is Serac real? What is like
Well, I
all that
think,
stuff?
yeah. So I think like the question here is, did we get too in our own heads about that stuff? Because I, I don't know. It's a weird question because the first 2 seasons, the show has trained us to
Mm-hmm.
look for those discrepancies, look for those
Yeah.
things. In season 3, they didn't do any of that stuff, and so we were still looking for it,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't there to be found. So
I
I
still
could
think it's
see why people
there.
would enjoy it less. Well,
I
it's
still think it's
there.
there. It's just
It's
not
there in a
as,
different way,
yeah.
like a very different way. It's there more like in what is the plan versus like when is this happening and where, like, who. I don't
Yeah.
know, because they make everything pretty explicit throughout the season,
But
except
it's like
for that character motivation.
it's like going to a magic show in LA and wondering, what the fuck is up with all this weird flamboyant outfits, and why we got all these flowing scarves, and what's all this pageantry and showmanship? Like, why can't I just see the trick and then have it explained to me immediately afterwards? Like, some people, like, everyone wants something different out of a magic show. Some
Sure.
people really like just having their mind blown, pretend it's real. Some people like trying to figure out how the hell they did that. Some people like going home and getting on YouTube and figuring out how they actually did that, so then they can loudly explain to everybody who just wants to enjoy the fucking magic show how it's done, and how they're stupid if they think they're being fooled. Like, Westworld is a little bit suffering from that, and that, like, it's hard to make everyone happy, and any gaps that you see in its storytelling, you then say, what is the least favorite thing that you liked about this show? Oh, it's its action. Oh, it's its characters. Oh, it's the concise storytelling. And that's, if they just do less of that and more of this other thing, you would like it more, but then someone else would like it less. So, for
Yeah.
better or worse, they said this at the end of season 2. They're making the exact show that they want to make, and I guess I'd rather them do that and occasionally fail than constantly trying to triangulate to some imaginary audience that then no one can authentically enjoy themselves either. And that's not me making excuses.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, these are artists and they're making art, and not everyone's going to get it. And some people are going to get it real hard and real good. And then you might not enjoy some, and not relate to some parts of it, and then you'll relate to others. But, like, I'm pretty comfortable saying this is not trash, and that's the other thing I keep coming back to. It's like, holy shit. We've been watching a lot of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation, which I unironically worshipped as a child. I would not watch that garbage. Like, I would never get to the season 3 when it finally got quote unquote good. Still pretty trash, but like, we've got an embarrassment of science fiction riches right now with The Expanse, with Westworld, with Devs, with Mr. Robot, with The Leftovers. Holy shit, the last 5 years, like really hard, crunchy science fiction. Maybe not all is going to be to your personal taste, but something is, and I can't say that for the previous like fucking 20 years. We were in a sci-fi drought. You'd have some wheezy Star Trek but like, science fiction fantasy was in a pretty rough place until the 2000s. So I don't know. I just think this is like the idea that Westworld is like not worth someone's time if you like science fiction. Seems crazy to me, but it's everyone's entitled to their opinion,
Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
So on that note, if you want more of this, we'll be back Tuesday to talk about, because we did very little like imagining what might happen next year or next season. We're going to be doing a lot of that next week. Please send in your feedback, westworld@baldmove.com, if you have a question for us or Miss Renfro, because she'll be joining us for the entirety of that podcast. We're going to put this season in bed in style. If you're staying with us, speaking of crazy science fiction, we got Rick and Morty, as we mentioned. We're going to be covering Devs on a club exclusive after hours, off the clock podcast. And then in June, we'll be coming back with just a really good time, which is The Walking Dead season 9. That's a show that is trash, and we treat it as such. And we're also doing essentially movies of the week. We're doing The Conversation, which is a classic 1970s Gene Hackman film this week. But we try to do a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of Oscar-worthy stuff, a little bit of nostalgia things, and we're doing that and more. We also got watch parties of The Expanse and Star Trek, and what's the other thing we're doing this week? Unsolved Mysteries tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Go to baldmove.com. We've got a lot of stuff to keep your interest if you don't want to end the ride with us here at Westworld. But then if not, we will definitely be back for season 4 when it returns, whenever it does return, 2021, 2022. And if we don't see you back anytime, we'll definitely plan to see you back then. And until whichever one of these timelines or simulations you find yourself back in our company, until then, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
Have a great whenever, if now is indeed now and this is indeed the present.